After our wonderful experience facing down an enemy dreadnought, it was clear certain things had happened that we were unaware of. One, somebody had sent out a distress call, because that's the only reason they would send such heavy firepower. Two, we needed to get prepared better. Three, this ship needs a refit. And one of the first things we did is I made sure that everybody knew that we needed to update our Mosquito fleet as best we possibly could. Upon the fleets, we had to have them readjusted so that we could have multiple turrets, both dorsal and ventral, along with several turrets on the both port and starboard side. This would give us a complete 360-degree arc of fire while leaving the main guns, which, even for a ship my size, would have to be fixed. However, it still allowed for all the areas that we would need to hold the extra ordnance. The only issue was going to be that the ship had to be slightly expanded, which meant, again, I had to watch my ship be basically cut down to its base components and reassembled. Our wonderful Zels were not happy to see another one of the places they had called home turned into, well, nothing and then rebuilt. However, I made sure that all the little amenities that were required were there and then some. In actuality, I added a few bonuses to my ship. Because of all the things I've done, those in charge of the fabricators were more than willing to help me out. The fact that I had led the Mosquito fleet to an out-and-out victory against the Dreadnought was something they could not hide. In fact, they wanted to make sure I was as happy as possible, and I had no problems with that. My crew was happy with that as well. The Zels didn't take up much room, and they were much easier to talk to than most folks. However, it would have been nice to actually have a couple humans on board. At least, maybe one who's nice to look at. That being said, I still had to watch the entire ship get basically disintegrated, rebuilt, with the turrets intact. And this time, I made sure that we also had a microfabricator on board, along with a certain supply of certain raw materials so that we could build whatever we needed. These materials were things like palladium, simple steel, any gold we could find, silver, that sort of thing. And of course, a bunch of copper, because that one seems to be universal no matter where you go. As it turned out, the ship not only was able to handle the crew and myself a lot better as far as comfort goes, but I don't know what they did to the engines, but I remember calling in and giving the message, "Guys, I don't know what you did to my engines, but this thing is running so much smoother. Whatever you did, make sure the other ships get this." I remember hearing chuckling on the other end of the comms. "Yeah, Roger, we thought that upgrade might work. We definitely put some extra bushings in for stabilization. Your engine now isn't just shaking the holy piss out of your hull." "Oh, that's cool." It wasn't long before I was able to breach the atmosphere and head back out into space and help out with everything that needed to be done. And what needed to be done was a lot. I used my ship along with its new abilities to help slice up whatever space debris was there and bring over to the fabricators. When not fighting, that's pretty much all we did, was try to build as many ships as possible. There was an attempt to make autonomous vessels, but the only thing we could actually make autonomous that actually worked were satellites, and a lot of them. In fact, we had several satellites that were designed specifically to create large fabricators to create our larger ships. And yes, we had a feeling it was just going to get larger and larger. Yet there were certain fabricators designed specifically to build our defense satellite. Our defense grid was a setup of 8 different rings around the planet and around the satellite of Luna, our moon, that would cover in all different directions and be able to fire several at once. Each of them lined up with at least a single energy weapon and 24 missiles. Now, the kicker is, we realized while facing the dreadnoughts, the missiles didn't do all that much. They were great for facing down smaller ships, but this dreadnought, oh no, this one had a hull that was a lot thicker. And if he set out a distress call to say that we were punching through the hull, they were going to send something bigger and meaner next time. And we had to be ready. So, I asked them to set me up with a couple of torpedoes. Armed torpedoes. and very, very armored torpedoes. I told them I wanted to make sure that they could handle the blast of a main gun and still hit their target. They said that was not possible considering the main guns are photon-induced railguns. I really had to plug in to figure out what in the hell that meant. It just meant that they used a sharper type of electric current, which made them fire faster and more accurate. I don't know how in the hell that helped with the accuracy, but it did. Still, the fact that the projectiles came out at such a speed was something we had to worry about. What really concerned me was the fact that they had seemed to learn, and the ship that we had blown up was almost human in its design. Covered in turrets from one end to the other, mostly short-range items, but we had plenty of large turrets to siphon off this sucker. In fact, we even salvaged a few of the turrets and put them on our new battleships. And we were hoping that eventually we would get a fabricator large enough to make actual dreadnoughts. Things that would make this piece of garbage look like a children's toy. But for right now, we had to worry with just the Mosquito fleet, could we hold out against anything else? And 2.5 weeks later, 17 days, we found out. A whole battle group came in. Not just a battleship. Didn't seem like a dreadnought. It seemed like one of those original battleships, but there wasn't just one of them. There was 3 of them. And with that 3 was a whole host of extra ships, destroyers, some sort of frigates, we think, and all of them primed for a fight. We had somehow kicked the hornet's nest, and they were all coming to find us. Oh, shit. The alert went out along everybody, and I just said, net call, net call, net call. All fighters, key on my position. Be prepared to jump into close quarters combat on my go. And I could hear all the guys in the back. I yelled to my crew, wake up, wake up. And I hit the buzzer and started yelling, General quarters, man your battle stations, now! They all immediately ran to their station, as they were well drilled in this. They got into the turrets and started hooking up to the equipment so they would be able to lock onto any target. I got all the torpedoes and missile launchers primed as best I could. Thankfully, this time I was loaded for bear. I told them I wouldn't be caught flat-footed this time, and neither would anyone else. Those guys on the ground, I give them a hell of a lot of props for able to bring up this much ordnance that fast. Thanks to the fabricators, but let's face it, 2 billion souls on a complete war footing can do a hell of a lot of work. And I would not fail to protect them. I called across the fleet. Mosquito fleet, prepare to jump in 3, 2, 1, jump! And with that, we all did a micro jump right towards the enemy fleet, as we were all scattered on all different parts of the planets, from one pole to the other, from one side of the crater to the other. And before they even knew what was going on, we all jumped into view and immediately started firing with our main guns. We locked into the battleships with our torpedoes, and I just yelled, torpedoes away! As I fired my only 2 torpedoes straight towards their lead battleship. The battleship must have been stunned at our complete interest in tearing them apart because they didn't turn their turrets initially. But then they immediately did. I immediately started taking evasive action and started screaming into the headset, hold on, here we go, and started bouncing and weaving all different ways. You don't really bank in space. That's something you do when you're inside a planet's atmosphere. You simply use your 360 degrees to bounce in erratic movements so that they can't track you. Continuing to strafe with everything I had, I began to use the lock-on function that we had. We stripped clean out of one of our own aircraft, and I locked on to 20 different targets at once, and I just let them all fly. One right after the other, the missiles launched out of their tubes and began to track individual targets. These individual targets were clearly of alien design, and I wasn't going to waste a single chance to kill every last one of them. And as I looked around, the entire Mosquito fleet had swarmed in and was doing the exact same thing. And before I had time to enjoy the trails as the fighters began to burst apart from the missile strikes, all the torpedoes began to strike into the battleships. Their point defense systems fired like crazy, trying to shoot down the torpedoes, but just ended up glancing them, and the torpedoes would adjust a little bit enough to still strike the battleship. As they did, they would sink in, and just like our bunker busters, would wait even a half a second until they were inside the hull before exploding. The resulting force would launch the ship from one side to the other. The ship itself kept moving sideways, up, down, left, right, center, back, up, left, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, A, B, start. It was crazy how it moved like that, and eventually they just went silent and started going adrift. I wondered if either A, we had struck the engine, or 2, we had just hit them so hard they ended up bouncing around the bulkheads. I didn't know, didn't care. What I did know is that I was hearing alarm bells going off like crazy. All sorts of ships were beginning to lock on to our position and beginning to fire their own missile volleys. We hoped that we had shot up enough for our destroyers to get into view, but that wasn't enough as we saw several missiles being fired out. I bobbed and weaved enough to get me away from all the projectiles and energy weapons that were flying through the air. The entire area of space seemed to be on fire as ordnance was firing left, right, and center, and energy weapons seemed to slice through the air, all different areas. We did not go unscathed as I saw several of our ships explode, leaving that golden atmosphere to burn in space for that one single moment as a soul was again extinguished and sent to the other side. I didn't have time to mourn. All I knew was that I had to get us far enough away where we wouldn't be targeted as well. Yet I could hear everything going off. I immediately launched decoys, chaff, flares, you name it. It all went out the back of the aircraft. And I just hoped that they would take care of it. Thankfully, mostly the decoys are what took care of it, as those missiles seemed to bank away and fly into the decoys. 5, 6, 7, 8 explosions at the same time. Those that didn't take up the bait flew into the chaff and just got tore apart by all the stray metal as it went through. The small flares didn't do much, as these missiles did not seem to be focusing on our heat corona, but instead on a radar lock. Thankfully, the one missile that got through the decoys and the chaff was shot down by our gunners. I yelled back, "Great shot, guys! Now hang on, we're going back for another run." I immediately spun the ship around and then burned as hard as I could towards the enemy fleet. I was coming down straight onto their dorsal side, right on the starboard side at about a 40-degree angle. I came down like crazy and I saw turrets turn towards me. And I was like, oh, well, it was nice knowing you guys. And that's when I saw the most glorious thing I ever thought I would see. The destroyers had made their way around the planet. Destroyers didn't do micro jumps because they would end up jumping and hitting our own people. Instead, they had to simply fly around the planet to get into position. But their guns were able to fire down onto the enemy fleet, now only down to one battleship, which was barely hanging on. You could see the enemy fleet trying to reverse course, trying to back away from the gravity well of the planet. I knew very well that once in a gravity well, you can't jump to FTL space. You'll just kill everybody on board. As they began running, I screamed into the comms, "They're falling back, they're falling back. Run your weapons hot. Kill the son of a bitch." And with that, everyone turned and began to fire into them. Didn't matter if they were being chased by any type of ordnance or they were ducking and weaving. They began to fire into the formation. All the enemy ships began to take immense amount of fire. And with that, I saw something that just made me almost have too many happy thoughts. As our one battleship got into view and fired a full frontal volley straight through their formation, and I saw several of their ships blow apart with several different colors of blue, green, orange, and red. With that, I could almost hear cheers coming from the other ones, and we heard a distress call from the enemy fleet screaming, "We surrender! We surrender!" Really, everyone seemed to listen for a moment and wait for a response. I keyed the mic. "Is that what they told you when we surrendered? Did you show us mercy? Or did you send us into an arena to die and to be used for your own perverted pleasures, you son of a bitch?" There was silence on the line, as I could feel the tension even through the darkness of space that they wanted blood so bad. I was not the one to fire the first shot, but instead, the battleship had rotated itself so that it could fire every single one of its guns on its dorsal side at the same time. And with that, it punctuated their fleet and tore them a new asshole. And with that, the battle was over. A few stragglers were picked off fairly quick, but now we had a lot more salvage to take care of, and that's what we would be doing for the next few weeks. We didn't know when the next attack was going to come, but we had to be ready for it. And you know, if you want peace, you better prepare for war. And that is what we did, without stop, without question. We continued to make ready. I looked at my ship and decided I would need even more attachments. I would need to turn this thing into a true warbird, even though it was my home and I didn't want to see it get disintegrated again. I still needed something else. Having only 2 torpedoes was not worth it. I would need at minimum 6, so that I could have at least 4 in the front and 2 facing to my stern. At least that way, if I had to bolt, I could make them a good reason to slow down or give me a chance to get the hell away. I reloaded on decoys. They worked wonderfully. The chaff did too. I decided to leave only 1 set of flares left just in case I was fighting inside an atmosphere. Maybe then it would hook onto my heat corona, but whatever. It was what it was. They didn't fight that way. All we knew is that we had taken heavy casualties during that battle, in personnel and equipment. Thankfully, one of those is easily replaced. Finding good, competent pilots, that's going to take a while. After the whole battle, I was chosen to lead the flight school, to let them know how it was to fight in space. I would still have my rank and my position as commander of the Mosquito fleet. However, I left the day-to-day operations to my XO and his staff. I would have a lot of work to do down on the surface. And as I landed the aircraft, my wonderful warbird, I had to watch it get disintegrated again. This is why I never actually gave it a name. I keep watching it being torn apart. My Zels were not happy again with this, but I told them I would make it worth their while. With the addition of new weapons, there was a few more creature comforts as well. I made sure they had all they needed and then some. I had to worry though, as one of my Zels decided that, maybe I shouldn't say decided. She went into heat and she ended up breeding inside the ship when I wasn't there. I'm glad. I really didn't want to see that. When Zels breed, a female goes into heat and she just gets all the males around to do what they do. And I really did not want to see that. I did wonder what the hell the smell was inside there when I came back though. Now, thinking about it, I'm a little grossed out. That being said, they were more than happy with the new additions to the ship. The ship itself wasn't all that much bigger, but with the constant enhancements, it was much more comfortable to ride in, along with the addition of new bedding, new sheets, new foods for them to try, an even better microfabricator in there. Everything was much better. I flew that sucker right to the academy, and the look on everyone's face as I came in basically unannounced. They tried to hold some sort of goofy formation for me to welcome me in. I simply looked at him and said, "Yeah, you know all that drill and ceremony shit?" "Yes, sir." "Yeah, it goes away now. I expect respect for what befits my rank and position. Aside from that, we have a lot of work to do, and we don't have time for BS. Now, fall out." With that, everyone moved out to their assigned positions. I was briefed on what I would have to do the rest of the day to get everything set up, shown my office. Of course, the group was not very happy that I had several Zels following me around everywhere I went. I told them that was my crew. They still didn't like the idea. I told them to get used to it, because not all Xenos are complete assholes. Just most of them. These guys here, if you actually listen, I'll tell you. They were actually imprisoned, just like us. They were forced to be manual laborers. Given their size, the fact that they're pretty smart, and that they breed at a relatively good pace, they make excellent service members. They make excellent, how do I put this? People gave them the crap jobs. They would have to climb into conduits and fix different things. They would be perfect for disciplining, as their small stature means they're actually smaller than some of the Xenos out there. Many of the Xenos are actually shorter than us. Well, yes, sir, I know. Yeah, I know you know. I'm just reiterating the point. That being said, I want you to understand this. When our battle is over, I gave them a promise, and I would get them home. But their home is a long way off, and we are not ready for that yet. And I'm not going back on my promise. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Good. Now, with that, they're going to get their own flight training as well. Sir? And I looked him square in the eye, and I gave him the bat glare right to his face. Yes, sir, he said. With that, we moved on to our next order of business, which was nothing but drilling and training for all the guys that were there. The new ones that were coming in were greener than grass. Holy crap. They barely knew which way the actual ships would fly. I had to introduce them to each of the different techniques that we use, each of the different weapon systems, and to show them how it was used using my own ship. It was actually interesting to see them look up in amazement like a child would at an air show, as I'm doing all these turns using the anti-grav motors, turns that you would only expect one of those F-35s to be doing once they go into some sort of hover mode. And yet I'm able to pull off all these maneuvers with barely a thought. Eventually, every single one of them would get their implants. If they didn't have them already, they were already told that it was quite uncomfortable to start with, but you get used to it. I showed them around my fighter as well and introduced them to my Zell associates, my crew. With that, I also showed them how to fly in formation and also every single tactic over and over and over again. As each one of them was beginning to get their own trainership, we went through drills over and over and over again. We didn't know when the next attack was going to happen, so these guys had to be ready. And with that, a year passed. We didn't think a year would pass before the next time we were hit. They gave us a year, a whole year. About 1.5 billion of us, a full year to be ready. Especially with the fabricators and the fact that we train not just to the standard, but we train well beyond the standard. They had no idea what type of hell was waiting for them. This time, our sensors caught them in FTL a good 20 minutes before they made it to the Sol sector. Not just the sector, or not just the Earth, but the actual sector. They would have to actually spend another 2 minutes in FTL just to get to Earth, especially from the direction they were coming from. Though they did plan it out very well, and Earth was actually in this rotation directly towards where they're going to be coming out, which we realized really quick was a standard tactic of theirs. It makes sense. You really don't want to do an FTL jump through a star or past one. It's not a good idea. Let's just say it's not a smart idea. That being said, the fact that we knew they were coming, I simply made sure that everyone knew what was going on. I was actually woke up in the middle of the night. Sir, what? What do you want? Somebody better be fucking dying. Sir, invasion incoming. What? How far? 30 minutes, sir. Get everyone up and everyone in the air, now. With that, I ran straight to my bird. My Zell friends barely conscious as I grabbed and had to carry half of them to the damn birds. They were trying to wipe sleep out of their eyes. They couldn't come to focus as fast as we could, but as soon as we started taking off, it seemed like somebody flicked a switch and everything ran smoothly. I was up in the air in less than 10 minutes. I radioed in and thankfully ended up on the PA system. This is Piranha 6 Actual to all cadets. Get airborne now. Ping on my location. I want you on my ass in the next minute. And with that, I actually looked at the radar, and sure enough, some of them had actually beaten me up into the sky. And I was actually grateful for that. They showed up unbelievably fast. It turned out all the drills, all the training, everything was good to go, as we saw not only their fighters, but several of them were actually flying in formation as they came up to us. As we flew out of the atmosphere, we could already see the battle had already commenced without us. We couldn't jump. We were still in the gravity well. If you jump inside a gravity well, it will most likely crush you. It's kind of messed up. The gravity will pull and you'll push and you'll just turn yourself into a pancake and just go splat on the ground once you fall for about another minute. Thankfully, you don't feel that because you're already about a quarter centimeter thick. But as we broke the stratosphere, we finally saw what was going on. And when they showed up, the alien forces, apparently they had given no warning and just started shooting. They had learned. They had learned to not give us a chance. They turned weapons towards us, and I started screaming, evasive maneuvers, and started banking left, right, up, down, left, right, A, B, start. It didn't matter what you do. You just get the hell out of the way and you move. I could actually see on my radar one or two of my guys getting hit. I didn't know if they were glancing hits and their radar just went out or they were full-blown hits and they were just gone. It didn't matter. We were going up. Keying the radio again. Target battleships. Prep torpedoes. Once in range, fire at will. After that, lock in on fighters and fire all missiles at will. Again, fire at will. Prioritize targets. And with that, I didn't have to wait long. As we got closer, they had learned to launch their fighter craft, but the problem is they launched swarms of little fighter craft that didn't have any type of protection at all. Even the slightest glancing hit made them fly and tumble and crash into each other. Our destroyers, our battleships, and our new dreadnoughts, which had finally come out, unfortunately there was only two of them at this point, began to fire in with their point defense weapons and strafing those skies with their main guns. The small fighter craft were decimated. Absolutely decimated. And if they were actually crewed, you knew they would have pulled back, but they must have been drones because they just kept flying through all that. And they did not stop. Even as they were blown into pieces, their parts would just flutter and spin in space. The alien larger ships, though, they were not playing around. They had seemingly upgraded their targeting system, and I saw a few of our destroyers taking hits. It was around this time we started to get within range, and I could see several of our fighters begin to fire their torpedoes. As we all began to get into range, wave after wave of torpedoes began to fire. 4 torpedoes out of 2,000 different fighters. That's 8,000 torpedoes were fired into the enemy fleet position, right towards their main battleships and their destroyers. They probably crapped themselves at the idea what the hell was coming. However, they thought that their point defense systems would protect them, but they did not know that we had armored the living crap out of our torpedoes. Our torpedoes were able to shrug off any of their point defense fire and simply keep going. However, that did not stop their main guns from firing into the torpedoes, trying to hit us on the other side. I gave the command, scatter, over the comms, and everyone pulled off in the different areas. Unfortunately, I found out later that at least 4 or 5 had crashed into each other as they were not paying attention. I locked into my sensor array as deep as I could. That way I could see every single direction at the same time while not losing my perception of which way I was going, which way I was facing. I knew which way the turrets were facing as well. I knew what was going on, everything in my ship. I was the mainframe of this ship. This ship was me, and that's what made us so deadly as we swarmed through the enemy formation. After those hits, the ships had been bounced from side to side, left, right, every single direction, some of them even blown apart right in the bow of the ships as they had tried to turn their main guns towards us. One of the poor bastards took a torpedo right through the main gun. It hit the power supply on the other side, detonated, and it blew not only in half, but it just scattered to all different sides, taking every ship around it with the damn thing. It was glorious. And all I could think of was, well, we realize you don't have a formation that tight in space combat now, do you? This was going to be more of our doctrine from here on out. However, I did find that we did start losing personnel at that point. We had no torpedoes left. I told them to fire every single missile they had, fire into everything they've got. The missiles won't hit as hard as the torpedoes, but they do damage. And with that, the missiles were sent on ahead. The point defense systems were so busy with the missiles, they didn't have a chance to deal with us as we strafed through their positions. We all flew through the positions as fast as we could, ducking and weaving, making sure that our turrets were just running hot as we blasted through. My crew were laughing in joy as they and blasted through the enemy ships. They knew this species. This species was the one that came to their planet. They're the ones that imprisoned them, and they were having the most fabulous time paying them back for all they've done for the species. And they wanted more blood than we did. Even though we were defending our homes, they were fighting out of sheer rage. I remember looking into one of the internal cameras through my mind, and I could see a smile across one of my friends' faces. I looked at the rest of the crew, and they were all with that toothy grin as they all were enjoying tearing the enemy fleet apart. They didn't enjoy the fact that I had to take all sorts of evasive maneuvers to make sure we didn't get blasted. We did take a couple hits, which sent us flying a little sideways. However, we did make it through the formation, and we got free from the point defense cannons. And by the time we were done, they were so busy dealing with us, they didn't realize that the next volley coming from our dreadnoughts was already incoming and slammed in the side of their formation. The battle was over before we had the chance to make another run. 2 ships had made a run away from the planet. 2 of their ships ran off into the night. 2 of their ships limped into FTL, and one of them exploded as it did. It had taken too much damage and was hoping to get away. Nope. The FTL engines just blew it apart on the aft end, and it just drifted through space as we watched the bodies float through the atmosphere along with all the rest of the debris. I'm sure there were cheers among all the other ships, but I couldn't hear them. I simply keyed into the radio. This is Piranha 6 Actual to Fleet Command. Are you in need of our assistance at this time? Over. This is Fleet Command negative, Piranha 6. RTB. Roger, Fleet Command. On our way. All Piranha units. Grab any disabled ship you see, and let's go home. And with that, we went back to the academy. We had just faced down a massive fleet. At least we considered it massive. But we didn't know. It seemed like these were getting more and more intense. Why did they want us so bad? Why would they want to hurt us? All we want is for them to leave us the hell alone. What do they have to do with this planet that gives them such a hard-on for the place? The answer to that would remain unknown, at least for now. Right now, I just wanted to get my people back home, because we didn't know what was coming next, and I needed to get the next crop of pilots ready. And of course, now I needed to fix this ship again. Maybe I'll add a few more extras. You know, just for shits and giggles. Well, that, and of course, as the man says, more DACA, more better.